Hello and welcome everyone to my YouTube channel Neuropedia Unlocking the Brain. In this YouTube channel we'll be studying the neuroscience, and today we'll be starting with the basics of neuroscience, that is the human brain. So let's start. As we all know, the most alluring thing is the human brain and is the main center that monitors all other body functions. Our brain operates all our events, including our memory, thinking, thought, sleep, our body movements, both voluntary and involuntary, and has three constituents: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. One by one, we'll be studying about these constituents. Let's talk about the cerebrum. Cerebrum, the largest part of the brain, is the cerebrum, and it is also known as the telencephalon or end brain. The cerebrum originated from prosencephalon at the embryonic level. Inside the bony cranium, the cerebrum is located. The cerebrum encompasses from the anterior frontal bone to the posterior situated occipital bone. It comprises the cerebral hemisphere, which accounts for 2/3 of the total weight of the brain. The cortex is the surface area of the cerebrum. The cerebrum performs numerous higher functions that encounter learning, emotions, reasoning, speech, vision, movements, and hearing, etc. Let's come to the second constituent of the brain, that is the cerebellum. It is the structure of the brain that lies beneath the cerebrum and accounts for approximately 10% of the total brain volume, but it has 50% of the total numbers of neurons in the brain. The most important purpose of the cerebellum is maintaining balance and posture. Brainstem. The brainstem lies in between the base of the brain and top of the spinal cord, and it connects the cerebrum with the cerebellum and the spinal cord. It has three components, namely midbrains, pons, and medulla oblongata, that is also known as medulla, that are present in descending order. The brainstem controls numerous body functions, including consciousness, blood pressure, breathing, heart rate, digestion, vomiting, swallowing, and sleep. Let's talk about the external structures of cerebrum. As you can see in this figure, the external appearance of the cerebrum is highly convoluted, containing grooves or depressions called sulci, singular, known as sulcus, and ridges or elevations called gyri. The major sulcus is the longitudinal fissure. Here you can see that runs in the medial sagittal plane, distributes the cerebrum into two hemispheres. Apart from this, there is another thing that is present in the brain is the corpus callosum. The corpus callosum is a white matter structure that connects the two cerebral hemispheres. Now let's talk about the internal structure of the cerebrum. The cerebrum has deep internal structures or tissues which are of two types, namely the grey matter and white matter. As you can see in the figure, the grey matter is in the outer cortex and is form the surface of the cerebral hemisphere, while the white matter is the inner myelinated fibers of cerebral hemisphere. The gray matter refers to the areas of the brain that primarily contains cell bodies, dendrites, unmyelinated axons, and it appears grayish in color due to the presence of cell bodies and their associated structures, as you can see in this figure. The gray matter plays a vital role in processing and cognition. White matter refers to the areas of the brain that primarily consist of myelinated axons, which are bundled together to form nerve fibers. The myelin sheath, which is a fatty substance produced by specialized cells called oligodendrocytes, give white matter its whitish appearance. White matter serves as a communication network, transmitting signals between different regions of the brain. So its main function is to connect functional areas of the brain. Let's talk about the lobes of the cerebrum. There are 4 lobes that are present in the cerebrum, namely the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, the occipital lobe, and the temporal lobe. All 4 lobes are involved in performing different functions. The frontal lobe. It is the most anterior part of the cerebrum that is located beneath the frontal bone calvaria. The function of the frontal lobe involve behavior, memory, personality, emotion, thinking, and reasoning, etc. The central sulcus separates the frontal lobe from the parietal lobe, and the lateral sulcus separates the frontal lobe from the temporal lobe. Parietal lobe. The parietal lobe is located behind the frontal lobe. Here in the yellow is the parietal lobe. Calvaria is the parietal bone below which the parietal lobe is found. Anteriorly, it is the central sulcus, this part, that separates the parietal lobe from the frontal lobe, and posteriorly, the parieto-occipital separates it from the occipital lobe. The parietal lobe is regarded as the brain primary sensory area that regulates the perception and integration of the input information, including vision, taste, smell, hearing, and touch. Occipital lobe. The part of the brain colored in red is the occipital lobe. Below the occipital bone of the calvaria, the occipital lobe is found, which is the most posterior part of the cerebrum. The tentorium cerebelli separates the cerebrum from the cerebellum, and the occipital lobe rests on this tentorium cerebelli, which is a thick membrane of tissue. The association area of the occipital lobe is responsible for the vision that allows us to see the world. Temporal lobe. Here in this, the part of the brain that is green in color is the temporal lobe. It is located below the temporal bone of calvaria and separated by the lateral sulcus inferiorly from the frontal and parietal lobe. The temporal lobe is not only one structure, but it has several structures that work together. One of the important structures that temporal lobe contains is the limbic lobe that interacts with other regions of the brain, but it interacts directly with the temporal lobe and influences the limbic system. The limbic lobe is involved in memory, learning, attention, automatic, unconscious bodily function, as well as unconscious emotional state. The main function of the temporal lobe is hearing, and it is also involved in auditory processing. Let's summarize what we have studied in this video. We have talked about the human brain. The human brain consists of three parts, namely the cerebrum, which is the largest part, cerebellum, and the brainstem. We have also studied the internal structures that includes the gray matter and white matter. The external structure of cerebrum includes the sulci and the gyri. There are four different lobes of the brain that perform different functions, that is the frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, and temporal lobe. Thank you for watching this video, and for such more videos, like, share and subscribe. Thank you.